And we will share this recording, and we'll also share the slides afterwards. So don't feel like you need to take too many notes. So we always just kind of share this just so that we all keep this in the back of our head in terms of our projects. These are the overarching priorities for the Erasmus Plus program. And we do hope that you keep these kind of in mind as you're thinking through your more specific topics and themes in your projects. So please do make sure that everything is inclusive, that you're trying to include as wide a variety of people as possible, and putting in place anything that they need to help them people to fully participate. You'll see as we go through the budget later on that there's lots of options there for inclusion support that you can ask for if you need it. In terms of digital transformation, again, this is trying to help us all to embrace the digital tools that are available to us. And you will see on the application form that you have the option to mark any of your activities as blended mobilities. That basically means that you're going to include some kind of an online element alongside your in-person mobility. So maybe you're going to do some kind of a meet and greet with your host partners before you go. Maybe you're going to have a meeting with them afterwards to evaluate the project or to follow up on some of the things that you did in person. The blended mobility can just be a really great way to support you to make the best use of the time that you're spending together in person by doing some of that introduction and some of that evaluation either side online. We've also got the priority about environment and the fight against climate change. And again, we'll show you how to apply for green travel if that's something that you want to do. But it's always good just to take in mind generally how you can include environmental considerations into your project and your project plan. The final one then is participation in democratic life, common values and civic engagement. I think it's a really interesting one this year because obviously we've got a bunch of different referenda coming up. We've also got the European and the local elections. So it's a really interesting one to start talking to people about in terms of how they can take part and how their opinion has an impact on society. So as I said, you may not be having a project specifically on these themes, but it's good just to keep them in the back of your head. So I'm going to move into the activities that we can do then. So in terms of your staff mobilities that you can do, this is a common one that we see a lot of people doing, courses and training. This is where your teachers or your trainers go away to do some kind of a course in another country. The course can last between 2 and 30 days, but we only pay course fees of up to 10 days. So that might be if there's a weekend in the middle or something like that. We have a specific quality standards available. You'll see there's a link there that you can click on when you get these slides later on that help you to decide if a course is appropriate and if it is good quality. But the main thing to remember is it should be a structured course with a predefined learning program. There should be learning outcomes there. There should be participants from a few different countries that you can actually meet with and interact with. It shouldn't just be a passive activity. It shouldn't just be a kind of something where you sit and listen, or a conference that's completely just about networking and is not actually about learning with the predefined learning program. But you can read more on those quality standards. The next option we have, again, this is for your staff, is job shadowing. So job shadowing, you can go between 2 and 60 days. This is where you spend some time in another organization, in another country, to basically learn and watch and see what they do, see how they work, see how they operate, and spend some time in that organization learning from your peers. It's a real nice way to kind of get under the skin of an organization in a way that's a little bit different, I suppose, than just doing a training course, because you're not necessarily just there for a particular program, but you're there to see the whole atmosphere of the organization and how they interact with their students and the staff and everything else. Another one then, and I must say we don't see this one very often, but I think it's a really interesting opportunity, which is where you're actually doing teaching or training abroad. So this is where you are going abroad to spend some time there, actually working in another organization. So do let us know if you're thinking of doing that, because we don't see it very often. Now, I'm going to move on to the learner ones. And this is where it starts to get a tiny bit different, because we have both adult education organizations and schools on the call here today. So do use the chat if anyone's confused about anything, and we will clarify. So the first one to cover is the group mobility of learners or pupils. Group mobility can be between 2 and 30 days. It does not have to be a big group. So a group is 2 or more learners, so it doesn't have to be huge. The most important thing here is that there's cooperation between the sending and the hosting organizations. So you must be working with the hosting organization to set up that group mobility. You can't just be going on a lovely sightseeing holiday, really, is what that comes down to. There must be that kind of peer interaction in some way. And you also must have teachers or maybe trainers in the case of the adults you must have some staff traveling with that group as well. So that's the group mobility. We then have two different options that are called either short-term learning mobility or long-term learning mobility. They're not called individual mobility on the application form, but I think it's a good way to remember them, that these are considered individual mobilities. For short-term, now here's where things get a little bit complicated. I was checking out all my program guide during the week to make sure I had this right. Short-term for adult education is between 2 and 29 days. Short-term for school is 10 to 29 days. Now, if you look very carefully, you'll see I have put an asterisk there. There are some exceptions for students with fewer opportunities who cannot go for 10 days and need a shorter placement. And there are opportunities available there. But in general, they're the normal ones. Long-term then is 30 days right up to 365 days, up to the year. The main difference with these short-term and long-term mobilities compared to the group mobilities is that you need an individual learning program for each participant. That's the most important thing to remember when you're deciding which one is right for you. You also need to evaluate and certify those learning outcomes individually. So each person that attends will need to complete a participant report and will need some kind of certification or accreditation of their learning outcomes. Now, I know people get a little bit caught up on this, so hopefully this next slide might help you out with that. It's good to remember that individual and group mobility, it's not based on travel arrangements. You can have a bunch of individuals, they can take the same flight, they can stay in the same place, that is okay. It's all about the learning program. It's about having a specific individual learning program, if it's say short-term or the long-term mobilities. If it is the group mobility, you just need one learning program for everyone. And it's the teacher or the trainer that travels with the group that inputs the evaluation into the beneficiary module at the end. So that's the main difference. Our finance colleagues will go through some more of this stuff on the finance side of it, but just to say there is a higher level of organizational support if you're traveling for groups or for individuals. And the idea with that really is that there's a bit more investment required, a bit more time required to support developing individual learning programs and individual evaluations. So hopefully that's clear. I know my colleagues are keeping an eye on the chat in case people have questions. So please do use that chat. Don't go away today with a question. So do use that chat if you have anything you're not sure of. Okay, so some other opportunities then. We've covered the staff and we've covered the learners. Invited experts is a really interesting one. This is where you're bringing an expert to you. So you're having an international experience, but you're having it here at home. They can come between 2 and 60 days. They must come from another country. And often we see that they maybe run a workshop for your staff. Sometimes people do it in conjunction with some of the others. So maybe they do a course. They send 2 or 3 of their staff off on a course, and then 6 months later, they bring that trainer back to run a workshop for the whole staff team to help embed that learning from the course into the whole staff. Doesn't have to be, can be a standalone as well, but we've seen interesting ways of people using that. There's also some support there for hosting teachers and educators in training. So this is people who are currently training or recently graduated can come and can spend some time working with you. We also have preparatory visits. So this is where you go and you visit the location that you're going to be carrying out your mobility in advance. It would generally be connected to supporting people with fewer opportunities. So maybe you're planning a group mobility and you want to send 1 or 2 teachers to go there in advance, check the place out, figure out how to get the bus and where to get the trains and how to do all of that kind of stuff without having your whole class tagging along behind you. It's a really great opportunity. It's not a standalone. We'll see this in the application form. You tie this into an existing mobility that you're planning. You can't just do preparatory visits. They must be part of a bigger plan. But they're a really good idea if you're going somewhere new or you're doing something a bit different that you haven't done before. There's also huge amounts of inclusion support built into the program. I'm not going to go into it too much because I think our finance officers are going to cover some of it later. But just to say, we do also have an inclusion officer in Lergus. So if anybody needs some extra help with that inclusion support, we can put you in touch with our inclusion officer and she can go through that with you in great detail if that's useful. Just a reminder of the countries that you can go to. Huge variety, and we love seeing people trying out new places and unusual countries that we haven't even heard of sometimes. So it's the 27 EU member states, as well as the 6 others that are listed there. They're your options of where you can travel to. I just stuck these links up for you. I know sometimes we get a lot of queries from people asking, but you know, where will I find a school to go and do my mobility visit in, or where will I find a good training course? We do encourage you to use these platforms. They're great places to go and meet other people from around Europe and also learn about what other people are doing. So do check out EPALE if you're working on adult ed, or eTwinning if you're working on the schools. Now, this is a special note that I want to put in, and this is just for the consortium organizations. So for a lot of you on this call, this is not relevant. If you're not a consortium, close your ears for 2 minutes so you don't get confused. But yes, so for a consortia, if you are a consortium and you have a bunch of other organizations all part of your consortium, this is just a quick note to remind you that all of those members must have an OID, and they ideally will get that OID certified before the deadline. We can have a little bit of wiggle room on this, but it makes life a lot easier if it's certified in advance. You'll see I've included a link there. So when you get these slides, you can click on the link that talks you through those steps. And there's also a form. And again, once you fill in your OID onto the application form, it will immediately know that you're a consortium, and it will give you a copy of this form. So you can download it from the application form. So those consortium members must sign this, what's called an accession form. It used to be called a mandate, I think. It is a different form, so check it out, download it from the most recent application form and get it signed. And then you'll see that they need to be signed either in wet ink or using this qualified electronic signature. By wet ink, we mean that you need to print it out, sign it with a blue pen and scan it back in. So just don't forget about that. I know for some of the bigger consortiums, this can take a little while. So you still have 3 weeks now, so I would start it soon, because it can take a little while to chase up some of your consortium members to get all those things done and signed. So a few more practical things from me just before I hand over to our finance colleagues, just in terms of the timeline. So the deadline is February 20th. It is 11 o'clock Irish time. Remember, if you're reading the programme guide and other booklets from the Commission, it will say 12 noon. That is Brussels time. So it's 11 o'clock Irish time. Don't miss that deadline. You will hear back from us by around about the end of May to say that you will be successful, but to say exactly how much of your budget has been allocated and what you're getting. Your project will start on the 1st of June. It automatically is set to last for 15 months. So that's until the end of August the following year. And then you will get an option at the 12-month mark to extend it if you need to. So that's just kind of that timeline to have in your head. So you'll hear from us during May, and your project potentially can be starting from the 1st of June. So these are just the next steps. And again, really, this is just so you have those links for later on for when you're working on this. Always check the programme guide. The most up-to-date information is always in the programme guide. And I know Norma Jean's going to repeat that again. That's where you'll always get the details. It's the best place to check. The link to the application form is there if you haven't found it already. And for everyone, so not just the consortium, for everyone, make sure that declaration of honour is signed by your legal representative. Again, I will say that can sometimes be a little bit slow, depending on who your legal representative is. It might be a CEO that might not be in your office that you might have to get hold of and get them to sign it. So start on that one now and try and get that done. I've stuck in a slide here that I'm not going to go through, but just a little bit of help from our colleagues on the operation side, just explaining how to do that qualified electronic signature. See, I can't even say it. I'm not going to try and explain it. But you'll have this slide afterwards if you need to look that up. Again, you can just do the wet ink, which is where you sign it with a blue pen. You have both options. I just stuck this slide in for you guys just so you have it in terms of some other opportunities outside of Erasmus that are happening in the background. These are ones that are managed through Brussels, not through us in Lurgus. But again, the links are there. If any of you guys are feeling really enthusiastic about your European projects and you want to find out more, you can click on those links later on. And then I have just put up our contact info. So for the schools education side, there is Dee, there's Carol Ann, and there's Eve, and they're all more than happy to help. For adult education, there's me. For the operations side of the house, any of those questions about OID, QES, all that complicated stuff, go to Ed or go to his colleagues on the ops team. The email address is there. And I haven't added the finance team emails, but I think they're on Norma Jean's presentation. And if they're not, I will stick them in here before I send this around later on because I wasn't sure. So that is me. And I'm going to stop sharing now and we'll see if there's any questions before I hand over to Norma Jean. How are we doing on that?
There's a few questions, Gemma, there in the link.
Okay.
Might be quicker rather than typing them out, might be quicker just answering them. Okay. The 10 days course fees, but we'll explain that when it comes to the budget. Some of them are relating to budgets and things like that, which will be answered. David asked a question, the difference between the learning agreements. And the different types of templates, yes, they are. One is just an agreement between the participant and the other one is their learning program. So that's what's different. An agreement is one that the learners would have with each of the sending organisations regarding their contractual obligations whilst they're completing them or involved in the projects doing the mobility. The other one is a individual learning program based on what that participant has gained from the project and all what the benefits of being in it. There was one there about the templates. They will be supplied once you get your contract. They'll be on the back of the contract. There's another question there that maybe you can answer. Oh, there's one here. In which case would you want to do an individual learning mobility? And have you an example? What's the difference between an individual and a group? Well, an individual would be a participant that wants to do, say, job shadowing or a course, whereas the
No,
group.
I think they're one of the main in terms of the learners. So the learners have the options for doing group or for
From your side, is it? Yeah, sorry.
and for pupils as well. So the school
Yeah.
pupils have the options to go as well for short term or long term. And I think Eve's answer really kind of covers it. It does depend on what are your objectives and what it is you're trying to achieve. I suppose, you know, for sometimes we would see in the school sector, you'd have students who would actually go and do a long-term placement abroad as an individual. They'll go and they'll study in another school in another country for a few months. We don't see the long-term happening as much on the adult ed side. But it is possible that it might just make more sense for people to go and to have those individualized learning programs. So if you've got maybe a group of adult learners who all have quite specific needs, maybe they have different disabilities or different learning needs, it might make more sense to do an individualized program rather than one joint program for everyone.
Yes, whereas with schools, if you've got pupils that you're going to bring abroad, you would have just the lead accompanying person and they would fill in the learner agreement on behalf of all the learning program on behalf of all the participants. So that's the difference between the
so
group and
the group
individual
mobilities can
mobilities.
be a little bit more straightforward, I suppose, but the short-term mobility or the long-term mobility might just make more sense depending on what it is you're trying to achieve.
There's a question there about OID. Yes, if you have an OID number, it's the same. Or if you've had a PIC, what we call a PIC number from the old program before 2020, yes, that will suffice. That carries on as well. It's the same one.
Yeah. So once you enter your OID into the application form, it will remember you and it will acknowledge the fact that you have an accreditation. It will know what your Erasmus plan is. All those things will start to auto-populate onto the application form.
Yeah. Here's one for you, Gemma. It's regarding, I suppose you could put this under the green travel. If a mobility is in southern Germany, can the participants fly to Switzerland and then travel on to Germany? So they could if they were going to do part of it as green travel, couldn't they?
No, it doesn't even matter if it's green travel. As far as I know, that's fine. As long as your end destination is one of the relevant countries. Obviously, we don't have Switzerland in the program, but if you need to travel through there, that's okay. We have people traveling through the UK sometimes as well. That's fine. In order for it to be green travel, more than 50% of the journey needs to be on the green transport. I think Norma Jean's will be covering that in a while anyway, so we can come back to that. Question there on e-twinning.
Twinning.
Do we suggest e-twinning before the start? It's definitely a good idea. It's not obligatory, but e-twinning is a great place to meet potential partners for those learning mobilities. It's also a great place once you've decided that you're going to go with them, you could set up a virtual e-twinning project so the students could start to meet each other and chat to each other before you actually meet in person. And that's what we talked about, that kind of concept of a blended mobility. And it's a great way for them to keep in touch afterwards as well. So yeah, certainly the e-twinning is definitely worth a look. Not obligatory, but I think it definitely is a great help.
Question there about the deadline as well. So the deadline is the 20th of February. It's normally around 11 a.m. Brussels time, isn't it? Or 12 a.m. Brussels time, 12 p.m.
11 o'clock here. Yeah.
Now, the only time we'd accept a late is if there's an actual, not just a technical glitch, but an actual IT error that can be proven. But we would suggest that you have the applications in plenty of time beforehand rather than waiting for the 11th hour. So late applications can't be accepted.
No, and answering Dahi's question there, how are you, Dahi? Yes, there is only one deadline. So again, I know a few people are claiming late. This call is specifically for organisations who are already accredited in either schools or adult education. Accredited organisations only have one opportunity to apply for your budget every year. That is in February every year. If you do not apply this time, you can apply until next year.
There's just one more question, Gemma. You might be more versed on this than I am. It's about consortiums. So the consortium has a possible of 130 members. Do we need to have an OID from all schools in the area?
Unfortunately, yes. We have flagged this with the European Commission that this is quite unwieldy to be done, especially for the large consortium. But yes, at the moment, anyone that wants to take part needs to have an OID and sign that document and upload that document. Now, there are some possibilities to add some organizations into your consortium later on, but to be honest, it is probably easier to do it in advance because it does require a whole contract amendment if you add them later. So I would say do your best now. You've got the 3 weeks to go chasing and get those forms signed and get them all set up with their OIDs. Our operations team are there to help if anyone has queries and needs support with getting their OID, and their contact info are on those slides.
Gemma, I think maybe a couple of people might have missed the beginning. Will you just go through it again, that this is just for accredited projects? Just explain the difference between accredited projects and non-accredited projects.
Yeah, so this is specifically a budget application clinic for organizations who are already accredited. If you're on this call and you're interested in becoming accredited later, you're on the wrong call. Send us an email and we'll follow up with you. The deadline for becoming accredited is not until next October. So this is for organizations who are already accredited. That means that you put in an application for your accreditation, you put in a long-term Erasmus plan, which was approved. And this is how to then apply for your funding, which is an annual budget request that you'll do every year. So is there anybody still on the call who is not sure if they're in the right place? Just following up on Carol's question there, the application for non-accredited is completely different. We're not covering that today, but we can send you some information on it if you need it. Enda, this call is specifically for adult education and for schools. The vet call is happening next week, although the information is quite similar, but it is a little bit different, and the vet call is next week. Okay, the chat seems to have slowed down a little bit. Somebody, oh, hang on, I'm wrong, they're popping up again. We're only recently accredited. Congratulations. We have a good few on the call here who were just recently accredited in the last few weeks. So this is the deadline to request your budget, and it is February 20th. If you don't apply now, you cannot apply until next year. So you need to decide now if you want to put in your budget request this year. I hope that helps. I'm not going to answer Mary's question because I have a feeling that Norma Jean is going to go into that in terms of the flexibility within the finance and the budget and all of that. Cool Mine, yes, you're in the right place. Congratulations on your new adult ed accreditation. Yes, you're in the right place. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Norma Jean and we will come back and do a Q&A again after her presentation. Because otherwise we'll get ourselves tied up, and we'll answer a few more of these in the chat box. And then we'll come back to this. So Norma Jean, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Gemma. That's great. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few budget tips using the application form. And just to let you know that I have written out a number of budget tips, and they will be forwarded to you all as well, along with the slides and the recording. So I'll just start sharing the actual application form screen at the moment. What I haven't done is I haven't put in a link of how you access from our website how to get into the application form, but we'll include that on the slides before or on the budget tips as well before we submit the documentation to you. So the screen I'm going to share with you is once you open up the actual application form itself. This is what it's going to look like. So I suppose the first thing to say is, like, the most important thing really is to understand Erasmus Plus funding in terms of the program guide. I'll have a link, etc., to the program guide and the relevant chapter for school education and the relevant chapter for adult education in that. And It's about paying particular attention to the sections on the eligibility of activities, participants, minimum and maximum duration of activities, and especially the section on the funding rules. Now, having said that, what you'll see in the Erasmus funding is a lot of things like unit costs. There are some real cost categories that I will discuss when I go through the form. But to give an example of what a unit cost is, for example, in the area of travel, the standard travel unit rate for a distance band of 500 to 1,999 kilometers is now in the 2024 program a standard unit rate of 309 euros. That's regardless of whether your flight, for example, costs 50 or it costs 450. Erasmus funding is largely in unit costs. There's a couple of budget categories that are exceptions to this, and they're called real costs. And as I said, I will cover those later. Now, having said that, accredited organizations and accredited funding is awarded in average costs. So in the application form, you'll be listing the kind of activities you're wanting to do, your number of participants, the duration of your activities, etc. You won't see any budget headings, and you might think you'll be getting a higher budget because you've checked the program guide and you can see, for example, oh, the unit cost rate is very high for that one. All accredited projects are given an averaged amount, usually around the group 2 country rate for individual support, usually around the 500, 199 distance band, etc. This will probably be reviewed again in the future, but to keep in mind that when you submit your application, you won't see a budget total. It'll go into a giant spreadsheet, and the European Commission then inform us of all the activity that the accredited projects have been awarded, and then we assign the average unit costs to them. So that's why it's very important. We will cover all of this in the future in terms of the project management day in May, etc., etc. But to be aware that at final report stage and during your budget, you will be reporting on the IT tools, on the actual unit costs in the program guide. However, your actual application itself is going to be awarded in average costs. So first of all, the first category is here is your accreditation. Now, I've used a dummy OID here that's not linked to an Erasmus plan, and that's why you're seeing a red X there. You'll know that you filled in all the required areas once the red X and each of these sections here change to a green tick. Now, in the case of mine here, I won't. And it's important that you scroll down fully on the page on each and double check that you have all the required information filled out. On this particular one, it's just the OID, and it will bring up your accreditation code and your accreditation type as well. So the next section here is participating organizations, and you have an option to enter in what's called a supporting or hosting organization. Please be aware of the difference between this. A hosting organizations are like a hosting school for a pupil mobility, a hosting school for a job shadowing, a hosting organization for job shadowing, a course provider, etc. Basically, hosting organizations provide content and mentoring to your participants. Supporting organizations might be ones that are helping you with logistics of travel, etc., etc. So just to be quite clear on the difference between a hosting and a supporting organization. Okay, so the next section will have your details here, and this is fed in from your original accreditation, your KA120 accreditation, and your legal rep will be listed there. And it is very, very important that you also let us know immediately if there's been any change to the legal representative or the contact persons as identified in your original KA120 accreditation application, because your KA120 application will automatically use this contact information, and we have to have up-to-date contact information, and be aware that when your project is live, we can only discuss the financial details, for example, with the named contact details for the project. So it's very important that you ensure that we're as up to date with that as possible. Okay, now, so the next section here. So in this section, you will see the Erasmus plan to come up. Because I've no Erasmus plan, it's not letting me click into that page, but you will all be able to see your details of your 5-year Erasmus plan in that. And the next section is where you're going to list the activities that you intend to do. And this is where, when we get in this information, we'll be giving the average costs based on the activities you list. Okay, so bear in mind the objectives in your 5-year Erasmus plan that's linked to your KA120 accreditation. The activities you request must be linked to your plan. However, you must be realistic about what you can achieve in the 15-month project duration of this KA12 application. Each year of the Erasmus plan, you'll have opportunity to apply for KA121 funding, and also you'll have the opportunity to extend by for 9 months at the 12-month mark. You're not asking for your 5 years Erasmus plan activities in 1 year. You're just going to request a reasonable request of what you intend and what you can realistically do. Now, just to bring this to attention here, the figures you provide in this section here will be used in the scoring of your budget request and will serve as your targets for implementation. Now, dependent on the number of applications for KA121 funding, the national agency may not be able to provide the budget for all of your requested activities. And this may result in what's called competitive allocation. And the targets in your grant agreement may be adjusted because of this. And we will have the rules governing competitive allocation on our website for each sector. And I'll have links in my budget tips to those rules on our website. And so please make sure to review these in advance. And be aware as well, at the end of this current grant agreement, your results will be evaluated based on the agreed target figures. And for that reason as well, it is very important to make the most realistic request possible on what you can reasonably achieve. Key tip, before you enter into this section of the application form, write down, know your proposed, what you intend to do, the types of activities, the number of participants, the number of accompanying persons, and any other costs that I'll be covering as well. Okay, so I'm going to go in here to my activity types. So any of you who are familiar with the old KA122 applications, this is a very, very different. You're just going to say what activity you're going to do, how many people, what's their duration, etc. Now, bear in mind as well, there is a huge amount of flexibility for KA121 accredited projects. So if you decide to change activities based on your Erasmus plan, there will be an option to do that later on during your project. Nonetheless, you should be thinking at this stage about what you should be reasonably requesting. I'm going to give a few examples here. And the first one I'm going to do is a group mobility of school pupils. And I know that they were mentioning the differences there between a short-term learning mobility of school pupils, for example, and a group mobility of pupils. And just to say as well, another key difference of the short-term learning mobility of pupils, if you choose a duration of less than 10 days, this will have to be justified according to each participant's individual needs at final report stage for the activity to be eligible. It's different for group mobility of pupils. The minimum duration is 2 days and it's one learner program for all. but it won't be sufficient to say, well, we're a DESH school. It has to be justified. A short-term learning mobility of pupils is based on participants with fewer opportunities, and also based on the shorter minimum duration is based on their individual needs. However, this doesn't apply to group mobility of pupils. I'm going to go for that one here, and I'm going to have 8 pupils, and I am going to have them going for a total. I'm going to switch here to average duration, and I'm going to have them going for 5 days. And that has given me a total duration then of 40. And in a group mobility of pupils, they must be accompanied for the full duration. So I'm going to have 2 accompanying persons here as well. Now, just to say as well, and to bear in mind, and I'll be covering the section in a second, under the category individual support, which covers accommodation, subsistence, local travel in the mobility, etc. In that budget category in the programme guide, you are allowed to claim 2 travel days in standard travel. If your travel occurs before the first day of your activity and after the last day of your activity, you do not need to request those travel days in this application. It is automatically included when we get the spreadsheet of the activity types. So in this case, I'm planning to have a group mobility of pupils in France, and they are going for a Monday to a Friday, and I'm not including the 2 travel days with that. And again, I have to put in 5 here for the accompanying persons. And I'm going to have 5 people here for the accompanying persons. And again, that duration has to match the number of participants then. In this particular case, we're going to have some of those pupils who are pupils with fewer opportunities, as defined by the programme guide. So the 2 accompanying persons have requested a preparatory visit in advance of this mobility to take into account of those pupils' needs. So I'm going to enter the word 2 here. Now, there we go. That's one activity semi-complete. The next bit here is I need to scroll down and tell how many pupils will have fewer opportunities. And I'm going to put in 3 here. There's also going to be a lot of e-twinning and Zoom meetings, etc. here. So I'm going to say, yes, we are going to be doing blended as well. So we'll have all the pupils taken involved in online activities as well. I'm going to come back to green travel in a minute. We're going to assume if you do not tick this one here, you're going to be requesting your standard unit travel costs. In another activity I'm going to do in a minute, I'm going to show you the green travel and what that kind of means. So I am going to go further down here, and it is asking me regarding exceptional costs and inclusion support for participants. Now, once I have ticked that there's 3 participants with fewer opportunities, this is automatically, when we get the spreadsheet, going to generate a unit cost of €125 for each of those 3 participants. So that is automatic, that what you'll get once you have participants with fewer opportunities. Now, there might be a situation of whereby you have a particular case of whereby your participants will have extra costs that without these extra costs, they will not be able to take part in the mobility. For example, maybe 3 of the participants are deaf and they actually need some sign language interpretation. And you've got in quotes that this sign language interpretation is going to, just say, for the argument's sake, is going to cost €400. In that case, you can request in an inclusion support for participants. This is not inclusion support for organizations. Inclusion support for organizations is an automatic cost is generated once you take fewer opportunities. But inclusion support for participants are real costs that must be justified at application stage, and if awarded, have to be fully receipted at final report stage. So I'm going to click in, I'm going to add a cost item on my group mobility here for my 3 participants. And as you'll see, it's going to come up with different areas here. So I am going to put in inclusion support for participants. And the activity type that it's linked to is the group mobility of pupils. I have 3 pupils in this, and here's where I must justify my my request for inclusion support for participants' real costs. I think 3 pupils require sign language interpretation at a quote of €400. So this is, it has to be specific, your justification of the costs. You can't just put in we're a DESH school. If you'll be getting your unit costs based on ticking the participants with fewer opportunities, but these have to be justified with that. And I'm giving an estimate cost of €400 here. Now I've put in 40,000. So I'll just put in 400 there. And okay, so I can now go back to my activities. And I'm now going to move on to my next activity. I'm going to send 3 teachers on a course to Italy. Now, these particular three teachers are exploring the idea of green travel at the moment. So first of all, the bad news and then the good news. The bad news is Ireland is an island country. It makes getting anywhere very, 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 very difficult, particularly in the context of the EU having declared that boat or ferry doesn't qualify as green travel. However, they have also said that if the majority of your journey, according to the EU distance calculator, you will have that on a link in my budget tips. And the EU distance calculator, which is easily Googled as well, you will put in your sending organization, your school, where it is, and then you put in where the hosting school or the course provider is. And it'll give you what's called an EU distance band. It will say, oh, it is 1897 kilometers away. And that means, according to the program guide, at final report stage, you will be claiming the unit cost of 500 to 1,999 kilometers for that. However, because the EU Commission has said that at least that over 50% of the journey must be by green travel, that actually means that if you have a look at the distance calculator and kind of go, right, okay, there's a course going on in, let's say, Malaga. There's a course going on in Malaga. And we would have to fly to this particular destination. And we could actually go and get the train from cross-continental Europe and reach Malaga that way. Now, I don't know if this is possible or not with Malaga. This is just an idea that you could be exploring at this stage. We will be putting tips and ideas, and we're still putting them together on our website to help you have a think about it. But the good thing about it is, if you're considering green travel, or if you want to consider green travel, you don't have to have a definite plan just now. You can actually request it at this stage. And if it turns out it's just not viable for you to do, then at final report stage, it just means the standard travel unit costs will be applied. The green travel unit costs are slightly higher. For example, that distance band I mentioned, 500 to 1,999 kilometers. The standard travel unit cost is €309. And the green travel cost is 417, so there's a slight increase. In addition to that, if you request green travel, you have also got the option of having up to 6 individual support days. So 3 extra days on each side of the activity to help you with a longer journey to assist with green travel. So in this case here, I'm going to pick courses and training. And I'm going to have 3 teachers going. And it's asking me the average duration. I have 5 here. There's no accompanying persons, so I put 0 there. And that's it, complete here. So now I need to scroll down to my courses and training. And we have 0 participants with few opportunities. There won't be blended learning on this particular one. But yes, we're going to have 3 participants for green travel. Now, so I can now go back up and add my last activity. Now, there's one thing I want to mention here. Supposing you're planning more than 1 group mobility of pupils, it's only going to let you enter in this once. And you will have to add up the total number of your participants that you're planning to send on the mobility and enter in what is the average duration, or you can switch the total duration. If you haven't, one mobility is going to be 5 days, one's going to be 7, one's going to be 8. You would add all that up by the total number of participations, by the total number of participants, and you will enter that in under the 1 group mobility of school pupils. Again, this is awarded an average cost. And at the moment, even if you had 3 group mobilities of school pupils planned, the Commission assign what's called a 10 plus 5 to it. So supposing you had 3 and you had 25 participants in total on the 3 mobilities, there is a limit in the programme guide of 10 pupils or €1,000 that can be claimed in organisation support unit costs on a group mobility of school pupils. And how the Commission work that is at application stage, they allow for 10 plus 5. So even if you had 25 going, you would probably be only given average costs of organisation support for 15 in that regard. Okay, so the next one I am going to go on to is I'm going to have an invited expert as well. Now, so I'm going to click here, invited expert, and I'm going to have 1 person who is going to come to Ireland from Spain for 5 days duration. So I'll enter my 5 here. They're not a participant. They're not going to have an accompanying person. And our average duration is there. Then I'm going to scroll down and I'm not going to have any particular extra costs with that. Now, there is one cost type that I'm not going to go into in detail here, but I want to just bring your attention to it. I have an example and an explanation of that in my budget tips. So I think suffice to say that like this category is not for expensive flight tickets. It's a category for participants and their accompanying persons that cannot be supported with the standard travel category due to geographical remoteness or other barriers. And it only applies in cases where the travel support based on unit cost does not cover 70% of the travel costs of participants. So I have an example that I have in my budget tips. 3 participants to attend a job shadowing activity in northern Finland. And due to the remoteness of the location, the applicant gets quotes that the real travel costs would actually be €920 per participant due to having to travel by a combination of plane, train and boat to reach the destination. The location is in the 2,000 to 2,999 kilometers distance band as per the distance calculator, and as 395, which is the standard unit cost for that distance band in the program guide, and that is only 42% of 920. Therefore, in this particular scenario, the applicant could apply for expensive travel costs under exceptional costs, provided that travel costs have not been requested for them under the budget category travel costs. They're receipted, they're real costs, so they're fully receipted at final report stage, and they're only reimbursed at 80% of costs. So that is just bringing your attention to that category. This won't be relevant to any of you. The Irish National Agency don't request a financial guarantee. This would be the category that if you have costs for visa, medications, etc., or other entry requirements. And one other thing I would bring your attention to as well. Supposing you had two accompanying people who are accompanying persons with fewer opportunities. Maybe it's an accompanying persons for a person with a wheelchair. And because of the nature of the accommodation and the special kind of travel they want, you can see that the standard unit cost is not going to cover, and check that first always, that the standard unit costs will not cover the accompanying persons and those participants. In that case, you will be requesting inclusion support for participants here, and you'll be giving a breakdown of the quotes you've gotten for travel or for accommodation, etc. Do check the program guide, because quite often people will put in costs, not realizing what they requested here is much lower than what they would have gotten in the unit costs according to the program guide. So that is an option here, but at a final report stage, you won't be allowed to claim the travel unit costs, for example, if you've already requested and been granted the real costs for an accompanying person in this kind of scenario. Okay, so that's my activities that are filled up there. And my next one, the next area would be my EU values, and you would read through that. You would click to confirm. And in regard to your EU values, your annexes then is where you add your declaration of honour that has to be signed by the legal rep of your organisation. The legal rep is the one who was a legal rep for your KA121, your actual accreditation itself. Fine. Having said that, you need to click all the checklist once you've done everything, and it's a good little reminder there of everything there. And the last button here is your sharing. And a share could be with a new person or a contact list if you want to share the application you're doing with somebody else. We recommend to everybody not only to submit your application well before the application deadline, because things can go wrong or things might need to be corrected. But once you're happy with the application, download a PDF version of it. And I've also included details of what we would do in a situation of that you weren't able to submit your application because of technical difficulties, and you would need a PDF for that. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now and see if there's any questions that still need referring to.
Thank you so much, Norma Jean. I'm always amazed at how you have all of that in your head. So thank you so much. That's fantastic. So yeah, in terms of questions, there was one there. You said something about a maximum of 10 participants, but that was in a budget calculation, wasn't it? It wasn't. Yeah. So is this in regard to course fees or the group mobility of pupils I mentioned? The group mobilities. Okay, I need to clarify that one as well. Thanks for your query. You can have up to, I think there's different rules. You can have more than 10 pupils on a group mobility. That's no problem. But you can only claim the organisational support unit costs for a maximum of those 10. Now, the travel in individual support at final report stage is fine. You can have more than 10 pupils, but it's only the organisation unit cost that's limited to a number of 10 in that. Thanks,
Norma Jean.
Go ahead, Rona.
Yeah, no, I think I've been watching the budget questions coming in, and one of the very first questions we get every single year, not just for accredited, but for all projects, and it's to do with substitution. Is there funding for substitution, for teachers that are away on mobilities? And the answer, in short, is no. I believe the Commissioner are looking at something in the future, whether that's happened or there's something in the pipeline, but at the moment, no, there's no funding for substitution cover. And then there's another one I think that might apply. You see, a lot of the queries are application specific, but there's one here that Donal has asked, and it's to do with the difference between participants with fewer opportunities and the funding for participants with fewer opportunities for organisation and for participants with fewer opportunities for real costs. Norma Jean, do you want to explain that, or do you want me to do it?
Sorry, I was just looking at a different question.
All right,
Brona, sorry about that.
All right,
you go ahead there, and I'll take the next one.
Okay, so when you select a participant with fewer opportunities, you're brought straight away into a unit cost rate first, and that's for participants with fewer opportunities for organisations, and that's a unit cost rate. So what you have to select, if you have 5 people that you think are going to be participants with fewer opportunities, you put in the number 5 and it will pull in the corresponding unit cost rate. If you wish to apply for additional funding for individual participants to enable them to be able to complete a mobility, you can apply for participants with fewer opportunities and under that category would be participants, which is real costs. So they would be exceptional costs. That could be something with, well, for schools, for example, it could be that a participant doesn't have a suitcase, or they don't have the right clothing to go away, to go abroad, to say they're going to Finland or something. So you have to bear in mind that when it comes to participants with fewer opportunities, what that really means is it is a very broad scope. But if you break it down, it means that without this financial support, that particular participant would not be able to go on that mobility. And the new program, especially now, is all about inclusivity and ensuring that participants are fully funded. So just to give you the definition, is participants with fewer opportunities for organisation support is a unit cost rate. For participants, it's a real cost. And you will need to give what you quotes, and for the real costs, quotes on the pricing for each of those items that you want to apply for. But if you are successful, you will know, for the ones that have completed 121 projects already, that you can apply for additional costs further on during the course of the project.
Okay, there's another question there, and something I should have highlighted as well. The only mobilities that are eligible for funding are between your project dates. So from the 1st of June to the whatever date it is in 15 months' time. They're the only activities are eligible for funding. And as we said as well, at the 12-month mark, and at the 12-month mark only, you will have the opportunity then and only then to apply for an extension of 9 months. But with the accredited projects, they all start from the 1st of June. They cannot start earlier. Okay. David, did I cover your question there about there being a maximum number of 10 participants? I didn't think I already covered that. You can have more than 10 pupils. I just needed to clarify the unit support, organisation support for unit costs, that there's a limit on. Okay, so that's that one again. Stephanie, again, the programme guide will have links to the relevant chapters. It's very important for accredited organisations to be very familiar with the chapter relevant to their sector, and that covers all the unit costs, like organisational unit costs, etc. And with that, and we have links to all of that, and it is very important that that is looked at. Yeah, I think Lorraine, did Brona answer your question? There is, if you have a certain amount of flexibility, and while there is a possibility of requesting extra activities at the 12-month stage, It is very dependent on other factors such as competitive allocations and particularly what targets that you have stated and you've achieved already. Quite often with accredited projects, they don't, for various reasons, they don't achieve a lot of their activities. And then in that case, they have money left over and they can bring extra pupils with that. The key thing is try to be realistic about the number of pupils that you can bring. I don't understand that question of the 80% of the requested budget. I was given the example of expensive travel costs. That's in a very particular scenario. It's covered in the program guide, and I have covered it in my budget tips and given an example of as well. That should clarify it only. It's a very rare. It is possible to use it, but it's a very rare budget category in that we usually don't get that many applications on. Your organization is not linked to your profile. OID queries, on Gemma's slides, we have a link to our program to Ed Butler and the my operations. I've suddenly forgotten that word. The program operations unit, and they'll handle all the OID queries with that.
I'd say for that particular, I am coming to you, V. Griffin, in a second. For that particular query, if you go into the application form and type in the OID, it should start. It should allow you into it. But if you need to be the contact person for that project, you do need to contact our operations team and update, or we need to update the contact people on the project, and the contact people on the accreditation. The KA120 need to match up with the contact people on the current budget, the KA121, otherwise it all gets a bit confusing. Okay, sorry, I know someone had their hands up there. V. Griffith, let's go to you.
Hi, yeah, sorry. Obviously I'm working on a different side of it. I don't work directly from applying for this. I'm helping manage the budget within the ETB here. So it comes in, what I'm trying to establish is when the teachers have filled out their application, do they know how much they're looking for? You know, it's based on an average allocated amount, and obviously the real costs of flights and travel, and I know subsistence would be a day rate, but the real cost of the project will vary to, I suppose I'm trying to establish when it's awarded, do we know how much it's been awarded? How that is funded then, like does it come in different stages? And if there's a deficit on the school side, is that made up by Leargas?
Okay, I'll take that one there. So first of all, when the budget is allocated, they'll get application financial feedback of how much they've been awarded, and with explanation that it's an average amounts. They then get another link to the program guide and saying, now you check what the unit costs are, because these are what you're going to be reporting at final report stage. There'll be a project management day usually in May time. And that's where those teachers, the contact people who are on this application, have to attend that project management day. We will go through in detail the financial contractual rules. We will also have the IT tools training for where you report your budget, etc. with that. And then we'll explain how the process is done at final report stage, how your reported budget is financially assessed, in addition to a qualitative assessment, and it's that either a final payment or a refund is due.
Okay.
This is just the application stage. So that is your first step is when they get, yes, your application has been successful, here's your financial feedback based on your averages, etc. That's when you come in and start saying, okay, so here's our sum of money, and here is what the unit costs will be as per the program guide there at that stage.
Okay, and then one last question, just while I have, if you don't mind, then when it comes to the end of the program and the final report has been submitted, and we'll say, I know on the last project, we'll say there was a project management allowance of €6,000. If that's not all used within that project, do you look for that to come back to you? Is that a refunded amount back to you?
I'm going to, like, this is getting too much into project management questions. I think at this stage it's an application clinic really for only accredited projects. And, you know, would rather take those questions. And like, the thing is, like, I understand you're working for the ETB. Like, normally we can only really go into these queries with the named contact peoples on projects. And that's something to kind of keep in mind. Because it's getting too far into it. But let's suffice to say, it is explained at the project management day. It's explained in the final report about how the final payment or refund is calculated.
Okay, no problem. Okay, thank you.
Norma
Thanks, Norma
Jean,
Jean.
there's another question there, and again, it's to do with, I think it's further on down the process. It's to do with if funding isn't being used, can it be returned? Again, this is only an application clinic, so it's just to help you assist filling in the application form, and then after that, once you've
Asha,
been
I can link in
awarded.
with you on that, and we can discuss that later. I know Asha is an adult ed
Okay.
project.
Yeah.
But certainly it is, as Norma Jean said earlier, it's about being realistic. Don't
Yeah.
go mad on this application. Apply for what is realistic. You are going to get the opportunity to apply again next year. It's not like this is a once-off. You are now accredited. You're in the club, as they say. So yeah, be realistic.
And it is as well, like it's only what you're planning to do. So, and that doesn't have, you don't have to stick to everything, you know, it's not rigid. It literally is, it's quality driven. So you're going to put into the application form what you wish to do. The application form will generate your unit costs depending on what you've put in, and will also generate a budget for you. We'll come back then and say, and if it's successful, this is your project and this is what you've been allocated for your budget.
Yeah.
We know that what you apply for will never be what you actually get to realize throughout your project. You know, things change. The number of participants might change. You might reduce it. You might increase certain mobilities or number of participants. So, like it is all down to, it is literally just a planning phase at this stage.
And I think, Bronagh, I think that's kind of almost a mindset change for some people, when especially if they're new to accreditation. You know, we are giving you that flexibility. So this is kind of what you're intending to do, and we're happy for that to wiggle a bit as the year.
Whereas before, if I think for newcomers, sometimes it's easier because they just go, well, this is what we have to work with. But for people that have had projects throughout the year, they've come from the old program, and from the old program, you had to do changes, became formal amendments. Whereas now there's a lot of scope there that you can change your activities, you can change on your planned mobilities, so long as your objectives and themes remain the same throughout the project. But for application stage, it's good to know that. So you're not tied in to say, oh, I've applied for this, so I have to do this. You can always change it. So at the moment, it is only planning stage.
Okay, I'm going to answer Asha's other questions, and then Carlisle, I'm coming to you for that question about school mobility. So Asha, in terms of non-EU participants, yes, absolutely, that is fine. And if they need visas or passports or anything like that, you can look to those inclusion costs if you need that. And no, the same people that went on the preparatory visit do not need to be the ones that go on the main visit, as long as it all makes sense in your context and in your organisation. Caroline, can you handle the school exchange one?
Yeah, so can we do group mobility where a number of schools meet in a neutral place without exchange visits between schools? So you will need a partner school, so you will have to do at least some of your mobility within that partner school and in conjunction with them. So if you're going to do I suppose if you're going to do cultural exchanges, it would need to be with a partner school in the building.
Let me explain, because we have partner schools and they are all accredited, sorry. So the idea is that they apply in the same way as us, but instead of doing an exchange visit, so we'll do is a group visit of 4 schools, but in a neutral place. So the 4 schools will meet up and we organize a trip, the 4 schools doing the same thing together, but there's no exchange. We don't go to their school and don't come to us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so but you will be, the neutral place will be in a partner school or a hosting school.
Does it have to be in a host school? So it cannot be in a place that it doesn't belong to any other schools.
With the exception of it is designed with a partner school, and there is an exception of whereby it can take place at seats of the European institution, but it has to be designed with a partner school, but activities have to take place at the hosting school.
So there has to be, for example, if there's 4 schools, one of the schools has to be the hosting school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would go back and read the way it's worded in the program guide. I think that's always your best bet, because it does explain the relationship that you must have with the sending and the hosting. So go back and read that. We can tell you what page in the program guide.
Perfect, thanks.
There's a question there as well about organisational support. So organisational support means that for each participant that you make an application for to apply to do a mobility, they are given an additional unit cost called organisational support. So it's a unit cost raised, and basically what this unit cost is to help support that participant complete that mobility for any other additional expenses that doesn't fall under travel or individual support. So whatever other additional support a participant needs, but it'll default when you make the application, so it'll default for each participant. And there's different organisational support unit rates depending on the types of activities that you're selecting in your application form.
There's another bit of that question there. Supporting evidence documents for people with fewer opportunities.
For the participants with fewer opportunities, for organisations, all you need to ensure is that you select the number of participants with fewer opportunities.
In terms of evidence, there is a kind of a declaration at the end.
Not for participants with fewer opportunities. For the organisational, which is the unit cost rate, no. You just need to ensure that you identified.
Just jump in there, actually. That will be covered at the project management day, but the evidence that is required for participants with fewer opportunities, if it's a declaration from the legal representative to confirm that those participants with fewer opportunities are participants with fewer opportunities as per the programme guide.
Yeah, and that definition is there.
May I make an addition to my question?
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, for example, if the person is disabled, do we have to put the disabled medical report that we chose a fever opportunity as an evidence? Because we get some higher individual support for them, or the agencies will request these documents from us for fewer opportunities. In fact, I wanted to learn this.
All you need to do is tick that they're participants with fewer opportunities and ensure that they belong to the categories of participants with fewer opportunities. We don't require any details unless you're requesting real costs for them, for materials or other stuff without which they couldn't go on the mobility. Then you would need to provide some information of quotes for their particular costs, but we don't need further details of the category or medical reports or anything like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
The question there as well about is there a facility for seeking additional funds throughout the project? Again, yes, there is, but you need to get through the application for stage first, sorry. And this is just the application clinic. So any questions that are just specific to your project, you can email us, or your accreditation, you can email us separately.
I would say those further funds are quite limited. So I would be realistic now on this application in terms of what you're actually hoping to do for the year. Yeah.
Noreen's question there, yes, if you have travel days you didn't apply for and was automatically allocated, you can certainly use those. St. Ita's School, again, be realistic about your targets, that if you apply to send 20 staff on mobilities during the 15-month duration of this KA121 application, and say, for example, you only managed to send 5 and you apply again, you will be considered of having been very, very low on your targets, been unrealistic on the targets that you've mentioned. So you'll need to have the conversation amongst yourselves about how many realistically of your staff you could send. Now, I've said that this 15-month period can be extended by a further 7 months, I think it is, at the 12-month mark. And again, every year you have the opportunity to apply for funding. And what you don't want to do is request your whole Erasmus plan in 1 year. You just need to know yourself, what can we realistically achieve, and start with the 15 months.
There's a question there as well from St. Ita's for it's to do with, I think it's specifically to do with the project. So if you can email us, please, and then we'll give you a response. So just send an email to myself or Norma Jean and put in your project reference number and your query.
yeah, sorry, there was one there that was kind of a reply to something, so we mightn't have seen it. Somebody's asking about the 10-day course fees per participant. What about a participant doing 2 courses? They get 10 days max. So if they do 2 courses, we're still
Yeah,
only going to
final
pay 10
report
days.
stage, but
Yeah,
you don't
yeah.
know that at application. So you're not,
Yeah.
you're not going to identify your participants at application. But yes, if you're successful at final report stage, there is a 10-day maximum course fees per participant per project.
Yeah.
That's
And
not
for
per
Emma,
accreditation label, that's per project. So if you had a KA121 project under the February deadline starting on the 1st of June this year, then once that finishes, then you will only be allowed for the 10 days in between, sorry, for that particular project.
yeah, El Walsh is messaging me privately here. Follow up with the schools team if that application form still isn't working for you. I know you said you had to go. And then Emma Bulger, there's no maximum. This is another little perk of being accredited. The maximum is what is realistic for you and for your project to meet your objectives and what you can realistically do. Okay. I think we've caught up with all the questions in the chat. Folks, we have us for 9 more minutes if there is still questions. You also have our contact details. And I do think if it's quite specific questions to your school or your organization, it might make more sense to come back to us directly. But if there's anything else that's kind of big and broad that you want to ask, you have us for a few more minutes here. Maria, were you trying to come in there?
Yes, sorry. Just a question. Look, we're newly accredited, so this is very new for us here in Deva College in Castlebar. Okay, so we put in the application obviously before February 20th, right? Then you're saying in May we find out what allocation of budget we get, right? And between that information and we'll say okay, you're saying that we can start our project from the 1st of June. What sort of timeline exists between the budget coming in and the ability to draw it down? Does that make sense?
Okay, I suppose what will happen is that once the contracts are fully signed, and that's signed by the legal representative, etc., and the whole process of the contracts being signed, and the national agency have 30 days to make the first pre-financing payment to the school in the bank account specified. So there'll be from the date of the contracts being signed, that's going to be another 30 days.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
There's another question there about invited experts. So just to clarify, invited expert is an invited expert that comes to Ireland and they work within your organization. So for that particular mobility, your organization would be the hosting organization as opposed to the planning organization. And an invited expert, it can be, yes, it could be for both. It could be to work with students or with staff.
I would go back to the program guide again and just read the definition there. That's probably the best way to see it. So it's about someone who can help improve the teaching and learning at the receiving school. So they're not just coming to run a class for your students. It would have to be sort of for organization development in some sort of a way. But you can read that in the program guide.
Yeah. And there is a learning agreement attached to it as well.
Yeah. No, I know Roisin had a few questions during the chat. And sorry, Roisin, we lost you in all of the messages coming in. So I think you need to go back and look at that. Your preparatory visit must be connected to another mobility. A prep visit can't just stand on its own. But I think you're talking about last year's project. So listen, link in with the relevant project officer and they'll follow up with you afterwards. I
think that's everything, everyone else.
I think that might be it. Where can we find the program guide? Well, that is probably the most important question. The link to it is in the slides. You can also just Google Erasmus Plus program guide. It will pop up. Make sure you're looking at the 2024 one. And anyone that's been around for a few years will be delighted to see that a lot of the rates have gone up this year in terms of travel and in individual support and all kinds of bits and pieces. But yeah, the link was in my slides, so you'll get that.
Mine too.
Probably not this evening now at this point. It's in Norma Jean's as well. Probably in the next couple of days.
And then there is also, somebody else asked as well, about different links. Sometimes the easiest link to remember is just our website. And then you can go through the various links depending on what you're looking for. So, which is much easier. And there's also our email addresses and contact phone numbers and things like that. So sometimes if you've got just the one link to remember, which is www.leargus.ie.
Yeah, and for the adult ed people on the call, I am also doing a drop-in session for you the week before the deadline. So if you want to pop into that, you're more than welcome. I'll include the link in a follow-up as well. Okay, Sinead, Garmagat, everybody. It's been great to have you all on, and I wish you a lovely evening. It is still a little bit of sunshine here, not for much longer, but yeah, hopefully be in touch, and we can't wait to get all these applications in. And well done, especially to all of you that are just newly accredited in the last couple of weeks. I know it was a big job to get over the line, but you've done it and you're here, and we're delighted for you. Okay, thanks everyone.
And we have a Noreen with raised hand there.
Oh, jump in,
Yeah,
Noreen, go on.
Is it okay if I ask a quick question? I asked it, but I don't think I phrased it correctly. So basically, when I applied last year, and we applied for courses, like for training abroad, and then it didn't mention in the grant check summary anything about travel days. It just says 5 days, and like I have it in front of me on a different screen, but it doesn't mention travel days. But can we assume that they're included automatically and include them then in what we spend and in the final reporting?
Well, that's a specific project question, Mike. We've been told by the Commission that travel days do not need to be requested, that they are included automatically. So if you got application for financial feedback and it said individual support for 5 days, that's 5 days only. But you would probably, if this is a live project, you would need to email either myself or Brona, and we'll take a look at it for you.
Oh, okay, I would email you in
Okay.
the morning, so.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Is this for schools, Noreen?
It is for schools,
Yeah,
yes. And I'm just wondering, as well, you said that the travel ban money is going up for 2024, and we're going at Easter to do a course in Nice. Do we travel on the old
Yeah, so
money
it's
that was
whenever you sign the
allocated?
contract. Yeah, so that's the 2023
yeah.
contract.
Okay,
Yeah.
no, that's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
See you, Jim. Take care.
I think you can stop recording, Isabel.
Oh, yeah.